Hey guys. Alright. So, have any of you ever thought about what you want to do after you reach retirement age? Or maybe you're already there and you're thinking about it right now, but maybe you haven't thought about, or all during your life, what it takes to be able to do what you think you want to do. Or maybe you want to retire and travel the world. Maybe you want to stay where you are and play with your grandchildren. Maybe you don't want to retire at all. Maybe you want to continue doing a job that you love. But what does it take to do what it is that you want to do? It takes energy. And our next speaker is going to tell you how she has so much energy. So she suffered from digestive issues and hormonal imbalances growing up, and that gave her digestive issues, and she had cystic acne for almost 3 decades, and doctors said that it was genetic and she needed meds to treat it. But through her experience, she figured out that whole plant foods and lifestyle modifications have the power to heal any root cause of health challenges. And she turned her health around. She healed her son when he was young from chronic ear infections, allergies, and asthma. And after a horrific day of traveling yesterday, she still had energy at 2 a.m. this morning. So please give a warm welcome to Ranzi.
Thank you, Karen. That was a great intro. So, who here interested in all of what we're talking about at this festival about raw food? Who wants to hear when you've been doing this for decades and what the benefits are? So this is my 30th year. I began a raw vegan lifestyle back in 1994. But I have a different story than those who have been speaking so far and those who are at this festival, in that I was exposed to it at a very young age, but chose to ignore it. My grandmother, my paternal grandmother, was very ill back in 1921. She had asthma and emphysema, and she was hospitalized. Now, they didn't have processed food back then. They didn't have GMOs, genetically modified ingredients back then. However, my grandmother lived on a meat-based diet. And after years of eating mostly meat and animal products and highly cooked foods, she was not well. And the emphysema especially ended her up in the hospital. The doctors gave her whatever drugs they had at that time, and she got worse. And the doctors told her, "We cannot help you anymore. Get everything together, because you're probably gonna live another few months." And this was back in 1921. My father was only 4 years old. And my grandmother was really petrified because she didn't have relatives in the area and she didn't know what to do. And what happened was, while she was in the hospital, a friend came to the hospital and brought her a little paperback book that came out just before, in 1918, this little book, The Mucusless Diet Healing System, by a German professor named Arnold Ehret. That was the first printing of the book. And my grandmother read that little book in 1921, and it changed her life and the course of her family's life. Who knows if I'd even be here. And everything changed. Instead of dying in a few months, she lived over another 50 years. Past anything that the doctors would have recommended for her. And she decided to follow the guidelines in that book of going to plant foods. The words vegan and raw, they didn't exist. Nobody knew those words. But my grandmother changed her diet and ate raw foods during the day, and she had a big salad in the evening, sometimes with a little bit of steamed vegetables. That was the basic diet. And she raised my father that way. As a child growing up, I still remember they were always healthy, those two. They never went to doctors. They never had any kinds of problems. And they would sit outside a lot in the sunshine. They really believed in being out in nature, getting sun, not following this sun fear that was starting to happen all over, the doctors recommending their patients not to go in the sun. So it was, I always saw this opposite with my father and my grandmother, that they were always in the sun. You know, even back then, when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, a lot of this fruit fear was already happening. Don't eat fruit, the sugar, you know, weight gain, all these things about fruit. And my father and my grandmother lived on fruit. So I saw this, but at the same time, my mother believed that we needed animal protein as children growing up. So she insisted that we eat animal protein. And what continued at that point were years and years of fighting between my mother and my grandmother. Now, my grandmother tried to keep it down. Like, there were also times that were loving and patient and calm, but my grandmother was very concerned about what was happening with my sister and myself, because we were always sick. We were raised on an animal-based protein diet, and in the 50s, that's when processed food began. So I was starting to eat Wonder Bread, and I was like, my favorite foods were potato chips and Oreos, and I'd have them for dessert after having cold cuts for lunch on Wonder Bread. And it wasn't working for me, obviously, because I was like on maintenance antibiotics all the time. I was always getting sick. By the time that I reached adolescence, I had severe cystic acne all over my face and my back, and started to have a lot of digestive issues, which culminated into IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. So I had these severe skin eruptions, like cysts all over my face, and then I also couldn't digest anymore. I was bloated and gassy after every time that I would eat. Now, when I would go to the dermatologist, I would ask, does this have anything to do with what I am eating? And the dermatologist said, it has nothing to do with what you're eating. It's all genetic. And I said, but I don't know anybody in my family who has cystic acne. And they said, it's still genetic. And so I wanted to believe this because my favorite foods were cheddar cheese and cheese doodles. And I used to binge on them every night while I was watching TV. And I was so addicted to them. Cheeses are loaded with salt. Today, it's important to note that many companies that are putting out cheese products are also adding aluminum to make the cheese slice better. And so we're wondering why so many people are getting Alzheimer's disease. So I grew up in a home where I saw both, and I also saw my father and my grandmother connecting to other creatures. Like, they would sit outside and the wildlife would just come out and come over to them. And my mother would be in the house with her fly swatter, killing all the insects, everything. She was afraid of spiders. I remember that. She would scream, and she would hit them with the fly swatter. And my father and my grandmother would take any little insect outside in a tissue. And so I just loved what I saw my father and my grandmother doing. So for me, it didn't start with health. I didn't make the connection. I didn't want to make the connection. And I just wanted to do what my mother was saying, because I could eat my cheddar cheese and my cheese doodles, But that emotional, that spiritual piece, I was beginning to take that in. And when I was age 17, I became a vegetarian. I did not realize the cruelty of the dairy industry. I thought, well, I'm not eating animal flesh anymore, so I am helping the cows, I'm helping the pigs, and I was, but I didn't realize the cruelty of the dairy industry, and also that that was one of the main causes, if not the worst culprit, to my cystic acne. Because many years later, when I went vegan in 1989, after over 25 years of cystic acne, my acne was gone in 3 months. And what did I give up? Dairy products. I gave up dairy and my acne went away in 3 months. Well, I was angry. I was very angry at the dermatologist. And I even went back to a couple of them. I had been on so many drugs. I had spent thousands of dollars. And they all told me this was genetic, and I believed that. While at the same time, my father and my grandmother were they were both saying that it was about what I was eating. And that if I looked at that, I would solve my health issues. But I didn't, and I went in steps. So for those of you who are here at this fruit festival, you can listen to what those of us who have more experience with this are talking about, and you can jump further than what I did. Like for me, I went in these little steps. However, when I got to having my children, I had my daughter in 1987 and my son in 1990, and that's when I started to change. That's when I started to talk to my father. And what I heard from him was that if I want to have healthy children, I need to change my diet and my lifestyle. And I need to go in a really positive direction with, he didn't use the word raw vegan either. He said you have to start eating uncooked, natural foods. And my grandmother wrote an entire book about it on the benefits of fruits and vegetables. And I still have some of her poetry, which I look at sometimes, and it just speaks to me. And so in 1994, I went fully raw vegan. The night before I went fully raw, I ate an entire loaf of almond butter and jelly sandwiches on whole wheat bread. That was like my goodbye to glutinous grains. It was my goodbye to processed food. I used to think that that was healthy. Like in 1989, I thought that was healthy. But my son had asthma and ear infections even as a vegan, because we were living on pastas and breads and processed foods. And when we finally gave that up in 1994, and I'm telling you, I went overnight, and my kids were like a little freaked out, because the next day, no more of breads, pastas, any of those things. And they started to heal. My daughter was sick a lot as well. It was like all of a sudden, I had these children who were really healthy. My son's asthma cleared up in a matter of months. And even though my cystic acne had healed in 3 months in 1989 when I went vegan, even on processed foods, but just getting rid of the dairy, in 1994, the scarring, I thought I had lifelong permanent scarring of my skin. And even the scarring went away with raw vegan. And what I have seen over the years has honestly blown my mind. Because some people ask me, why do you stick with this for so many years? Why are you making it a religion? So many people have asked me that. Like a lot of people say, I love what you do, you're so cute. But, 30 years, it's a bit extreme. And so the thing is, and what I can tell you is that when you have this much energy, and I just turned 70, like I play with my grandchildren like 4 to 5 days a week, and I'm going up and down the slides with them. And And I see a lot of other people my age on medications. They have no energy. They have all of these menopausal symptoms. And I went through menopause with no symptoms at all. Like, I love my menopause. I have energy like that anybody would just wish for. I wear my college clothing. So it's a great way to maintain your weight. If anybody here is looking to get to a more ideal weight, I would say go low-fat raw vegan, because this is the way. A fruit-based diet, high in greens, and I mean all kinds of greens, because I can tell you, I worked 10 years ago. I've been coaching since 1998, and I also have a vegan coach certification course online that started in 2015. So I'm sending vegan and raw food coaches around the world out there to help people. And what I've seen in my coaching is that there has to be a variety. Fruit is crucial. This is a fruit-based diet. I love my fruit. Fruit has so many vitamins, so many nutrients. It has glucose for energy. That's what keeps my energy going. But I can tell you, this woman who I worked with 10 years came to me with stage 3 cancer, and we were able to turn it around with the fruit. She was scared to go on fruit at the beginning because there are some health institutes that recommend no fruit for cancer. But I can tell you there are people healing with fruit. And she started having fruit in her diet, and it made a huge difference, plus the leafy greens. But I also believe that we need those cruciferous vegetables. They are extremely anti-cancer and protective. So we get those cruciferous in as well. So 10 years later, on a raw vegan diet, this woman is thriving. She is thriving. She never had the chemo. She never had the radiation. She's thriving. Her tumor got smaller and smaller and smaller over the years. She had to be patient with it though. And most people are not there. We're so used to, in our society, having this quick fix, this really quick fix. And it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I recently lost a very dear friend of mine who for many, many years I was really trying to tell her that hormone replacement therapy has a lot of risks. And she felt like she was eating healthier, but she was still eating more animal-based. She was exercising more, she was eating healthier in terms of getting more fruits and vegetables in. But in the end, still being on HRT, on hormone replacement therapy, and still having animal products in her diet, she ended up with uterine cancer. And this happens to many women. And there are those risks, but doctors don't talk about them. And so there's a huge benefit coming into a raw vegan lifestyle because the food itself gives us the hormones. And so that's what gives you all of this energy and no longer fatigue. There was a 25-year-old school teacher who came to me with chronic fatigue and thyroid problems. In the middle of the day, she collapsed, she hit bottom, and she was afraid of losing her job as a teacher. And so she said, what do? I have no energy. I told her to eat fruit. And she said, well, my doctor tells me not to eat fruit. So many of the doctors tell their patients not to eat fruit. She started eating fruit. This was the main food that changed her life. Suddenly, she had abundant energy. And she was like, I just can't believe it. I really can't believe it. And she didn't go completely raw. She was went about 80% raw, eating mostly raw food during the day, and then later on in the day having a huge salad, a huge main meal salad, and some cooked food, more in the way of steamed. And I just want to tell you something about cooked food, because this for me was one of the main things that impacted my life and why I continued to stay raw for 30 years. And I will be doing this for the rest of my life. If you see me in 20 years from now, I'll be fruit-based raw vegan. What I want to tell you about is the acrylamide studies. Now, I don't know if any of you, I see John shaking his head, he knows about these studies. They changed my life, and I've written about them in my books, about these studies. Now, this acrylamide study began at the University of Stockholm in Sweden in 2002. And what the scientists found was that the higher you cooked your foods, we're talking about complex carbohydrates here. So they started with a white potato. And they cooked it, they steamed it, they boiled it, they looked at it under a microscope. They didn't see any changes. Then they went to higher temperatures. They went to baking. And then they looked at it under a microscope. And what they saw was that as you cooked the potato at a higher temperature and you started taking out the water content of the potato, you started seeing a plastic-like coating forming around the food substance. And they termed this plastic-like coating acrylamide. And what those scientists determined is that that acrylamide is highly carcinogenic. And the higher the temperatures, like we're talking about potato chips, any kinds of chips actually, they're cooked at very high temperatures, French fries, even when you bake a potato and you see it starting to brown, that's a plastic-like coating. You look at it under the microscope and you can see it. And that acrylamide, I was like, wow. And that really spoke to me. I had already turned raw vegan in 1994 to help heal myself and my son, but those acrylamide studies totally back me up. And when I go out and I speak, I always talk about those acrylamide studies. They are real, that's real science. And the acrylamide studies, what they're saying is that children of today, growing up on all these processed, highly cooked foods, that these children are dying before their parents. Like we're seeing worldwide, like children at 8 years old having heart attacks. We're seeing autism. Now I also want to say that I also, for 43 years, I had a career as a speech and language pathologist, working in the public schools, and the last 20 of those years was in an autism continuum program. And what I saw was at the school that they're feeding the kids chicken nuggets, M&Ms, the therapists, the other therapists, were reinforcing the kids with M&Ms, potato chips, and feeding them macaroni and cheese and chicken nuggets and Coca-Cola, and telling me, like, the kids aren't gonna want your stuff. And so I wasn't gonna listen to them. I started to create language activities around fruits and vegetables. And I started making smoothies with the kids. I started making salads. I started just giving them an abundance of fruit. And guess what? They loved it. They loved it. And some of those parents of those kids started working with me privately. Eventually, even the administrators of the school brought me in to do talks. So I was speaking about raw food, but I wasn't saying raw food. I was saying plant-based. And then in my talk, I would talk about uncooked, I would talk about acrylamides, because they wanted the science and I gave them the science. And what I was seeing with these kids, where the parents came to me, was I was seeing these symptoms that these children were having, and some of the kids who I worked with were violent. They were wearing helmets because they were banging their heads against the wall all day. And when I first started as a speech and language pathologist in 1977, there was, I think the statistics were 1 in 10,000 children. That's back in 1977. Today, in my state of New Jersey, autism is 1 in 32 children. And it is now predicted, because of this epidemic, that by 2032, that autism will be 1 in 2 children in the United States. So we are losing our children by the foods that we give them to eat, and also in other ways, by the injections that we shoot into them loaded with heavy metals. So we are losing our children because those heavy metals get lodged in the brain, and there is a very strong connection between the gut and the brain. And that's why what you eat affects you in many, many different ways. Not only in your overall health and immunity, which is crucial that we get the raw vegan foods in for that, but also for your mental health, for your emotional health. People come into raw food and they heal their depression and their anxiety and bipolar. I mean, I've seen it over and over again. So we really want to make sure that we're serving ourselves and that we're serving our families and spreading this message all over. And that's why I bring in students to my vegan coach certification from all over the world. I've had students spreading this message in Australia, and Sweden, and France, and the UK, and all over the US. And it is, in my life, it's my mission. It is my #1 mission of my life to spread this message, because I find it so personally empowering and just totally miraculous. And so what are the reasons that I stay raw vegan for 30 years? One is that this food contains fiber. And if you remember nothing else from my talk today, remember fiber. Only eat food that has fiber. Plants have the fiber. There is no fiber, 0, in animal food. There is no fiber in the processed packaged stuff. That also has additives. It has MSG, monosodium glutamate, hidden labeling in all the packaged foods. Even in foods that are vegan, like I now see parents giving their kids cauliflower puffs and telling me I'm giving my kids cauliflower. I'm sorry, that's not cauliflower. And that is very high in acrylamides. Most of the processed food is. Even breads, pastas, crackers, they're cooked at high temperatures, and they form those acrylamides, which not only destroy the nutrients in the food, but they destroy your digestion. They weaken your microbiome. They weaken your overall immunity and being able to be healthy and strong and energetic. And so fiber is crucial. And so eliminate all animal food, meat, turkey, chicken, fish, eggs, dairy, 0 fiber. And same with processed food. The next one is water content. One of the reasons that I stay with this lifestyle for so long is because it's not enough to listen to the daily recommended intake of 8 glasses of water a day and eating all cooked food. It's not enough water. We need to be bringing in water content in our food. And so I, years ago, felt very, very dehydrated. But when I'm eating all these wonderful fruits and leafy greens, I don't get dehydrated. I feel really, really good on a regular basis. My digestion is perfect. It's ideal. I mean, you should not be going to the bathroom once a day or every 2 days. I mean, I worked with somebody who's having a bowel movement once in 13 days. That is not normal. It's not acceptable. You want to be having a bowel movement after meals. So the water content, our blood and our cellular tissues are about 72% water. And so we need to be bringing in that water. And the best way to do it is taking in the fruits and the vegetables, which are so high in water content. I also am a big believer in sprouting, especially like in the winter time. It's harder to get to, like if you're in a cold environment. Like I am part-time in New Jersey and part-time in southern Colorado. And I mean, I don't have local all year round. So I can grow a garden myself, but I'm not going to be able to get local in the winter. Even the local organic farmers, most of them are not available in the winter time, so we're getting everything shipped. So even though I sprout all year round, especially in the winter, I recommend it. And you can start with very easy jar sprouting. And this is all part of what I teach. I teach this in programs. I teach this during my coaching. I teach this I have a women's health club for women who are looking to connect with other women and get information that is going to protect their health. And one of the classes that we do is on sprouting and how to do it easily. Jar sprouting is the best way. You can grow broccoli sprouts, which by the way, broccoli sprouts contain a compound called sulforaphane, which is excellent for your brain. It is excellent. I am having a lot of success bringing in broccoli sprouts for people who have kids with autism. It's fantastic what's happening. And so I'm very optimistic. In years of being a speech pathologist, I didn't see the same changes in the children until they started incorporating all these raw foods. That's when I see the progress. I'm working with families whose kids who were violent are suddenly not violent anymore. Like after 3 weeks of going to mostly or all raw food, their nervous system calms down. They're able to think, they're able to focus, they're suddenly making eye contact. So I'm seeing all these wonderful things. I'm also seeing people who have autoimmune conditions. One couple came to me. The woman came mainly because she was scared she was going to lose her driver's license. She had very deformed knuckles and a lot of pains in her knuckle joints and in other joints in her body as well, but she was really concerned that she wouldn't be able to drive. And within 2 months, she was able to heal from arthritis. And these are the kinds of things that happen regularly with going to a well-planned raw food lifestyle. And that's why I'm just so passionate about it, because I've seen it not only in myself and in my own family, but I have also seen it in so many other people. And even if somebody comes to me and they tell me, Karen, like, I'm not really willing to go mostly or all raw, but can you take me in that direction? Like one woman came, she was eating meat 3 times a day, meat and animal food 3 times a day. She's the principal of a nursery school and she couldn't function. Her ankles were so inflamed, she was very overweight, she wanted to lose weight, she wanted to heal her joints and get less inflamed, and she said, I'm willing to move in the direction, but I'm scared. And so a lot of people come from fear and they don't want to change, and if they do want to change, they expect it to happen in 2 weeks. And so I tell people, like, what have you been eating your whole life that you would expect to heal completely in 2 weeks? As Margaret Mead said, it's easier to change your religion than to change your diet. And I think that's true for many people. But this woman was willing to go in that direction. And I got her to go in steps to 5 days a week on whole plant foods and eating meat only on the weekends, 2 days of the week with her husband. When she was working and when she was home preparing food, she was able to incorporate new simple recipes and take off on it on her own. And Those 5 days, whole foods, plant-based, high raw, and only 2 days with a very small amount of animal food, still got her results. So what I'm saying is that if you're scared and you don't want to make a big change, start going in this direction, because you will already start seeing improvements, just like what I saw in her. At this point, 2 years later, she is fully vegan because she continued to focus on it. So I said fiber, and let's see. I want to make sure to give you these pointers. So protein source. Okay. So this is a big deal because everybody is into the protein craze. That's why my mother was scared to raise me on a plant way of eating, because of the protein. Meanwhile, my mother was always going to doctors. She listened to a doctor who told her at age 57 that she would feel young again if she had a hysterectomy. So she had a hysterectomy for no reason, to feel younger again. My father said you don't get major surgery for minor symptoms like you can't keep up with me when we're walking. She ended up trusting this doctor and going for surgery because she felt like she'd feel younger, and it triggered a heart attack, and my mom passed away at age 57. And that was also one of the times that gave me impetus to continue with my goals for healthy living, and eventually really making even more changes towards the raw vegan lifestyle. But certainly looking at what your lifestyle is, and really, do you need additional protein? Do you need animal protein, which is highly acidic, has no fiber, and our intestinal tract as human beings is like 20 feet long, our small intestine. I mean, John Wayne, who ate a high meat diet, they did an autopsy on him and they were shocked at all of the putrid matter that was all animal food stuck in his intestines. So this is also something to think about. Plant foods, they digest, they have fiber. So you want to think about plant protein. Now, as I have gotten older, I have increased my protein, but not a huge amount. I've increased it a little bit. But sunflower grains, which I eat on a weekly basis, I get a tray every week, 23.5 grams of protein in just 1 cup of sunflower grains. And all of the sprouts are like wonderful nutrition-based protein sources. They have all kinds of nutrition. But like I sprout mung beans and broccoli sprouts. And I'll sometimes do lentil sprouts and throw some on my salad. I don't eat a lot of bean-based sprouts because they're more dense, they're a little harder to digest, but I still will throw them on my salad. And they are an excellent source of protein. And so for some of you women who are getting all of these recommendations that you need to add all of this protein, I mean, a very high protein diet from animal food is really harmful to your health. All plant foods have protein. Even a banana has like 5% complete protein. A mango has all essential amino acids. We are getting plenty of protein, and it all adds up. It all adds up over a month's time. You're going to get all of the protein that you need. And so I look at it, but I also have been testing through myself, through my clients, through my students of my vegan coach certification, when they're working with people, how they're doing by adding plant-based protein versus animal protein. And we don't want to get super high in protein. We want to stay, 10, 15% is fine. Once you get up really high, Dr. T. Colin Campbell in his book, The China Studies, suggests it's connected to cancer. And the worst offender is dairy with its protein casein. Casein is a protein in dairy that is most linked to cancers, all different kinds of cancers. And eggs are specifically linked to breast, prostate, and pancreatic cancer. So I went over protein, I went over fiber, I already talked about nutrient-dense nutrition, and we get a lot of minerals in our leafy greens, because I have heard it be talked about that we can only eat fruit. I eat a lot of fruit, okay? But I did go totally fruit for quite a while, and I just want to tell you, I had a lot of sores. I had cracks on the sides of my mouth. I didn't understand where it was coming from. They kept getting worse, and especially in the winter, I wasn't sure what it was from. I started eating leafy greens again, but not only a little bit like I had earlier, I started eating leafy greens in abundance. And in 2 weeks, the cracks were gone, and they never came back. So I do believe that we need the minerals. If you're living in Costa Rica, my son, I'm so proud of him. He lives in Costa Rica. He started a fruit farm, and he built his own greenhouse. There, they live mostly on their own food. I believe that eating his kind of fruit that's falling down ripe from the trees, and he picks them ripe, that those have more minerals in them. But we're getting fruit that's shipped from other places. It loses its minerals. We need those leafy greens for the minerals, for the protein. They're just wonderful. So fruit and leafy greens and other vegetables, very important to have in the diet. And then there's the whole alkalinity and acidity. We already talked about that the animal food is very acidic, and so is processed food. Whereas, and so are stimulants like caffeine. Any caffeinated products are very acidic in the body. Whereas fruits and vegetables create an alkaline environment in the human body where our blood is slightly alkaline. We are not acidic beings, we are alkaline beings. So we need the alkaline foods. So this all backs up why we're living on this lifestyle, and why can I go for 30 years and having all this amazing energy? Like my friends, my family, they're all like, what are you doing now? Because I'm always on new projects, and my life is exciting, and I have all these passions. And I want to be able to be there for my children, for my grandchildren. That's my goal. Like some people say, Karen, what do you think, you're going to live forever? And I know I'm not going to live forever. None of us are. But I want to have a high quality of life while I'm on this planet, while I am with my family and with all of you. And you're, by the way, all the people who come to the festival are like my family. So I definitely feel that way. Like when Dave asked me to come, I was like, yes, Texas Fruit Festival. So it's wonderful bringing all of these like-minded people together who want to learn, who want to grow. No matter where you are right now, you're here for a reason. And that reason is to grow and to continue whatever you're doing right now, to add more raw plant foods to your diet and your lifestyle. And if you have children, if you have grandchildren, to start being that shining role model. Be that shining role model in their lives. I think I covered a lot. Does anybody know what time it is here?
4:49.
Okay, so yeah, I am going to stop. I have more information, but I would love to talk with you if you want to come over to me at any time during this festival. And I just want to end by saying that raw vegan food is the fountain of abundant energy and vitality. That is like my one point here. And the risk of diseases, including diabetes, heart disease, cancer, autoimmune conditions like arthritis, high blood pressure and cholesterol, is significantly reduced, if not completely turned around, when we have the openness and the willingness to take responsibility for our own health. And you have the remote control in your hands. Thank you. So I want to open it up to Q&A. Yes.
You mentioned protein. What's your opinion of soy protein?
Soy protein. So for many years, while I was vegetarian and then vegan, I ate quite a bit of soy. One of the biggest problems with soy, and I mean, I have seen some healing when, like in the Asian cultures, and they're known traditionally, the traditional Asians, like Asian women, had a very low hot flash rate, and there was a study done on this, like the Asian countries, depending on where, like 10% hot flashes in China and maybe 20% in Singapore. But the reason for that is because their diet was low fat and it was based on vegetables, rice, and soy. But I have to say that the soy today is not the same, okay? Most of the soy today is GMO. It's one of the top genetically modified crops, so I don't trust it. Even the manager of the health food store, that they go out of their way to do a lot of research on their foods, and they get the best ones, and they have organic soy. And I was talking with him, and he said, I cannot tell you that organic soy is truly organic. So I am, first of all, very skeptical about soy because of genetic modification. It also can be very hormonally unbalancing. A lot of the soy is highly processed. Tofu is extremely processed food. Tempeh is more whole food, and edamame is more whole food, but tofu and soy milk, that's highly processed food. I would say like tofu isn't really that much better than eating white bread. So very processed. And yeah, for those reasons, I don't eat soy anymore. And I actually felt better when I gave up soy. And I know that there is still, like, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine still does some investigations and studies, including soy, and they find that women who go plant-based and still include some soy, that they can turn around those hot flashes and menopausal situations. But I see women doing way better with raw food.
Just quickly, so I read things where people said that you can taste the difference between organic and non-organic. Can you tell the difference?
I can sometimes, not all the time, but I can sometimes. And I know that there's a difference. There's way more vitamins and minerals in the organic, for sure. So I still believe that we got to do the best we can, and the best we can do for ourselves is getting as much organic as possible. And if there are things that you can't find organic and that you really need, you know, like I do sometimes get a conventional avocado or banana or something like that. So depending on where you are, and certainly if you're traveling and you're in a situation, it's still better to eat raw. It's still going to be better to eat raw food. Plant food, raw plant food. I also have a free newsletter that if you want to join my Super Healthy Raw community, I send out a free newsletter, and I include events, raw food events, and information, and research, and recipes. So if you'd like to, I have a sign-up sheet where if you would write your name on the left and put your email on the right in print, that would be great. So I'll pass that around. Any more questions?
I think we got time for one more, maybe two.
Okay.
maybe a couple. I don't want to. Sorry, I don't want to be the question police.
How do you go to know how to break through?
Okay, well, I do have some. My hair is a combination still, and I have noticed that some of my dark hair actually came back when I started going raw. But I do use henna, because I go out and speak a lot. And so I just like this henna color. But I don't believe in using a lot of toxic products on the skin. That's why I just use henna. And that is something that I look at a lot. And also, I didn't get into some of the other things that I think are really important to look at in your lifestyle. One of them is products. One of them is what you're using in your home. Like I had to redo my floor. I didn't use polyurethane. I waited until I found a plant-based oil, and that's what I used on my floor so that nobody in my house would have reaction. Sleep is super important. Exercise is super important. Raw food is way up at the top there, but these other things are at the top as well. So raw food, exercise, mindset, positive attitude, the way you handle stress, they're all up there with the food. They're all up there on the same line. So, yeah. But I think also that as a woman gets older, that she should be happy with the way that she looks and not trying to do all these procedures and hair coloring. At a certain point, I'm just going to drop the henna. And that's really like the one thing that I do right now. But I also want to tell you that as you go more and more raw, you feel so clean. Like you don't smell. I don't use deodorant, and I mean, I like the way I smell. So all these things start happening to your body when you're taking in the foods that create the human design. Any other questions?
How much do you think, research-wise, in battle, right, being healthy, how much of it, in America in particular, in the United States, do you think researching chemical foods is as important as it is researching which foods to consume?
That's also really, really important. But I do have to say, T. Colin Campbell, who wrote the foreword for my book on autism, Heal and Prevent Autism, and that's all about everything that I talk about for improving mental health. He said that it's more important the foods that go into your body, and if those foods have a lot of chemicals, estrogens. Estrogens are really important, and we get way too much excess estrogen in animal food. He said that's more important than the chemical exposures. So yeah, I do look at chemicals as well. Like I don't swim in chlorinated stores because chlorine and fluoride and bromine cause an iodine deficiency, and that affects the thyroid. And we have so many thyroid problems because of the way we're eating. Bromine is often put into breads to help them rise, and in other things as well. But we don't realize this. A lot of the companies don't even have to list bromine, but bromine is used to rise breads. So this causes an iodine deficiency, and we need iodine. We need iodine for the brain as well. Anybody else?
Actually, we do have to start getting set up in here for the next event, so
Okay.
just wanted to let you know.
So I just want to end by letting everybody know in January I have my Love Raw Food and Yoga Retreat in Costa Rica. We still have a couple of casitas, beautiful houses. So ask me about that if you're interested. I also have flyers. If you're interested in the Vegan and Raw Food Coach certification, I'm doing a huge discount only at this festival. So I have flyers for that. And if you're a woman and you're interested in my Women's Health Club, come and ask me about that. I have all these things, and please sign up to be on my free newsletter so we can be in communication. And thank you so much for joining me today, for your excellent questions.